Today's daf is daf Kuf Yud, and we're up to the second line. Kisolik Rabbi Elazar. So let's just review what we know. We're talking about chal, which is the udder, and it's full of milk. And the halacha requires that before you cook the udder, that first you have to slice it both vertically and horizontally, which is called shesi v'orev, and then Tacha keneged hakosel. You have to sort of push it against the wall to get out all the milk. That's in the case where you're cooking it. And if you went ahead and you cooked it without doing that procedure of removing the chalav, then it would be osir. That isur is only derabanan because it looks like milk, but really halachically it's not milk because it's after shechita. Now, what happens if you roast the chal? So there we had two Lashonos of Rav, two different transmissions of Rav's Shita. And according to the Lishna Basra, the second version of Rav, that if he went ahead and he roasted the chal without first doing the kriya with an iron kriya, then it's also. Then just like if you cooked it, it's also. So too if you roasted, it's also. Kisolik Rabbi Elazar, when Rabbi Elazar came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, and the word solik means to go up because Eretz Yisrael is gavoa mikol harotzos. Ashkechinu lezeiri. He had a meeting with Zeiri. Amalei. So Rabbi Elazar says to Zeiri, Ikatano di asne lerav kechal. We had a brisa earlier that supported the lishna kama of Rav, that in the case of roasting, if he failed to do the kriya of the chal, and then he went ahead and he roasted it, that he would be permitted to eat the chal, even though he neglected doing the kriya. That was the lishna kama. And now we have the Lishna Basra, and the Brisa would support the Lishna Kama. So now Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Loza is asking Zeiri, would there be any counter Brisa that would support Rav's Lishna Basra that if he failed to tear open the chal and then he roasted it, it would be also to eat the chal? And that in the language of Rabbi Lazar is Ika Tana di Asne L'Rav Kichal. Is there any brisa that would support the Lishna Basra of Rav, according to which B'di Eved post facto, if he roasted the chal without tearing the chal before the roasting, then it would be also to eat the chal. And achve means he pointed L'Rav Yitzchak bar of Avudimi, and we have to add one little word here. The word Tana here in this Gemara that we just learned means a scholar. We're not talking about a Tana in the sense of, the Chachmei Mishnah. This is a later period of time. Anyway, so Rabbi Yitzchak, one of the Amoraim, supported Rav in his Lishna Basra to forbid eating the chal even after it was roasted. Amalei, so apparently Zeiri, having now identified that scholar who would support Rav, he approached that scholar by the name Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi, and Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi said, Ani lo shanisi lo kechal kol ikar. You should know that Rav's chumrah, according to the Lishna Basra of Rav, to prohibit the chal after being roasted without being torn first, is Rav's own original idea. I did not influence him or teach him that the Chal is also, meaning Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi really held that, like the Lishna Kama of Rav, that b'di'evet, if you went ahead and you roasted the Chal without doing the Kriya first, it would be mutter to eat it. But Rav came up with his own chumrah. Now, the Gemara is now going to use a kind of a metaphor or an idiomatic expression to convey the kind of chumrah that Rav came up with. Rav bika matzah v'gader ba'gader. A bika is a valley, and it's very dangerous. And if you fall, you can fall and then roll and roll down and down like a snowball effect. And if you want to prevent people and protect people from falling into the valley, you build a fence around the valley. And that's metaphorically what Rav did. He saw that there was a valley, so to speak, meaning there was a takola, people were falling down, and he set up a siag, a fence, in order to prevent people. So Rav's chumrah in Chal, that even after it was roasted, it's asur, is based on the fact that Rav saw a pirza, he saw a bika, and he came to improve the situation. The Rav Ikla litatlofush. So this town called Tatlofush, which we're not familiar with it, but apparently the Jewish population there was very ignorant. And when Rav visited that place, Shama, he overheard a comment of a woman who said to her neighbor, Lahi issa de ka'amra lechaverta, riva de bisra kama chalva boila v'shuli. Like a woman very often asks another woman for a recipe. How much of this ingredient and how many ounces of this ingredient. So he overhears this woman saying to her friend, I want to cook a litra, which is like a quart of meat. How much milk should I put in to the cooking? Omar Rav was absolutely like in a state of shock. And he said, Lo gmiri de basa b'chol vasa, is the ignorance so rampant here, so profound that they don't even know that meat and milk is also? And therefore, iakiv v'ka asar lehu k'chal. Ma'akiv means he stuck around. Instead, he was on his way to a different location, a different destination, but he stuck around and he ruled to the entire town. Maybe they had a whole gathering, like the primaries or something. And he ruled that they're not allowed to eat the chal because it's saturated with milk, even if they're roasting it. And this was a way of conveying to them and perhaps educating them about the serious isur of basa b'chol. So just to sum, what happens is that Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, so far, we'll see later on it changes a little bit, but he claims that Rav came up with his own chumrah on his own in response to the situation that arose in which he saw that there was a bika, there was a valley, there was a pirza, and people were not aware of the severity of the isur of bas b'chol. So he took chal and used it as kind of a message to the people that, we can't cook meat and milk together. Now, again, according to what we have until now, Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi did not bring any support for Rav. He just conveyed or transmitted that Rav had come up with this chumrah on his own. But Rav Kahana Masnihach, according to Rav Kahana, we have a different transmission, a different presentation, that Rabbi Yossi bar Abba Masni, that Rabbi Yossi bar Abba told over what we had heard from Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, Anok chal sheminika shanisilo. In truth, I did teach him, meaning Rav, that if you roast the chal without tearing it first, then it's asur. But I only taught to him that chumrah, that isur, in a case of a menika. Menika means that there's, let's say, a sheep or a lamb that, or a calf that is nursing from its mother, so that the nursing mother is totally saturated with milk in her udder. And as a result of that, I paskined that we have to be more machmir in the case of a mednika, of a nursing mother. However, that somehow Rabbi Chia, who was Rab's uncle, when he taught this halacha, he forgot to mention that this chumrah only applies to menika, to a nursing mother. So Rav walked out with the misimpression that it is an absolute rule that the udder is prohibited if you roast it without tearing it first. Now, what does the Gemara mean when it uses the term pilpulo shel Reb Chia? Apparently, Reb Chia was so on such a high level in his dissection and his analysis of the Gemara that very often he would leave out little details because he assumed that the audience would understand, but sometimes they didn't understand it. In this case, Rav took it one step further as a general rule that the udder is always prohibited after roast. Ravin Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef Ikol Levei Rav Papi. Okay, so these are Amoron that came to visit Rav Papi. And Aisu Lekamayu Tavshila Dekal. So in the house of Rav Papi, they served a cooked dish that was made of kal. So now the question is, what is going to be the response of these two guests, Ravin and Rabbi Yitzchak? And sure enough, they had a controversy. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef Ochal. Rabbi Yitzchak said, look, they're feeding me kal, I'm going to eat the kal. Ravin lo ochal. Ravin says, I'm not eating kal. Omar Abaye, when Abaye heard that Ravin refused to eat the kal, he was sort of like put aback by it, taken aback. Ravin tchola amaylo ochal. Tchola is a description of Ravin's tragedies. Apparently, he had children that never died, and therefore he's calling Ravin the tichla. He's the bereaved father. Amaylo ochal. Why wouldn't he eat from kal? Michti. Let's check this out. The Besu de Rav Papi, who is the wife of Rav Papi who's serving us the kal? Brate de Rav Yitzchak Nafcha Havi. She's the daughter of Yitzchak Nafcha, one of the greats of that generation. And not only that, Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, More di Uvda Havi. We know about Rav Yitzchak Bar Nafcha. Right, Nafcha means he's a carpenter, and we know that he's a pious person. He goes to all ends to make sure meticulously that he doesn't violate any Isa. So again, let's go over the family tree over here. We have the wife of Rav Papi who's serving in front of Ravin and Rav Yitzchak Chal. She, the wife of Rav Papi, was the daughter of Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. Why would she serve Chal without having some sort of a Mesorah from her father, Rav Yitzchak Nafcha? Ilav deshmiya mi bein nosha, if not that she had heard from Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, her father, Lo avi avda, she would never prepare this udder, this chal, and serve it to us. So therefore, what Abai is pointing out over here is that the chumrah of Ravin, in which case he didn't eat from the chal, is not justified, because really that the permission to eat the chal dates back to Rav Papi's father-in-law, who would be his wife's father, namely Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Okay, so what is the final minhag? And the truth is that we have minhagim chalukim, different minhagim in different places, different locations regarding chal. Bisura lo achli chala. Right, there were two main Torah centers in Bavel. One was Surah and the other was Pumbedisa. And in Surah, they refrained from eating chal. But by Pumbedisa, achli chalil. Now let's understand that the chumrah in Surah, if you were to visit Surah, even if you were a Pumbedisai, where they're lenient in eating chal, you would have to observe their minhag. And this is very crucial for understanding the next piece of Gemara, because the Gemara Pesachim says that when you go from place X to place Y, then you have to pick up the chumrah of place Y. Even though in place X, which is your point of departure in your hometown, they don't have that minhag l'chumrah, but nevertheless, the minhag hamakom is koveh. So therefore, in the following story, Rami Bar Tamri, to who Rami Bar Dikule, I guess he had two different names, maybe based on, where he came from, where his parents came from, whatever it might be. And for sure he was from Pumbedisa, which means that they were mekil and they ate chal. But ikul is surah. Now he's a guest in Surah. In Surah, they don't eat chal. And what day of the year does he arrive in Surah? None other than Erev Yom Kippur. And as you know, there's a mitzvah on Erev Yom Kippur to eat. According to some, it's simply because you have to prepare yourself for the fast. You can't enter into the fast on an empty stomach. So that's called Mali Yom Kippur. Afkidu kuli alma lakchidu l'shadinu. In other words, they were eating meat, but again, we're now in Surah where they don't eat the chal, so they all took the chal and they threw it out because they weren't allowed to eat it. That was the minhag in Surah. So what does Rami Bar Tamri do? He's from Pumbedisa. According to his local minhag, which is called Makom Sheyatas Misham, he eats the chal. So what does he do? Ozel iu naktinu achlinu. He gathers together all the chal that was thrown out by the Anshe Surah, and he makes himself a Sudas Erev Yom Kippur out of chal. Now, when they become aware of it, the local people in Surah, they're very upset about this guy. Who is this guy? What a chutzpah. So they schlep him to Rav Chizda, who's the Mord HaAsra there in Surah. They expect Rav Chizda to put a whammy on him, put him into Cherem. Aisu l'kamid Rav Chizda, Omalei, Rav Chizda says to him, Amai ta'avid hachi. Why are you violating our custom over here and eating chal? Amalei. So Rami Bar Tamra wants to justify himself. May Asrid Rabbi Yehuda Nadi Achil. I come from the province or the jurisdiction area of Rabbi Yehuda. That's my Rebbe in Pumbedisa, and he eats chal. Amalei. But what about the Mishnah in Pesachim? Les lecha, do you not observe the Mishnah in Pesachim that says that nosnim olav chumrei hamakom sheyatzu misham v'chumrei hamakom shehalach l'sham, that a person carries with him the chumrah when he travels. He carries with him the chumrah of his local destination, the point of departure, which is called Mokum Shiyotza Misham. And in addition, if he has a kula in his point of departure, and he gets to a point of destination where they have a chumrah, then chumrei mokum shaholach l'sham. And therefore, since you left Pumpadisa and you arrived here in Surah, how could you violate the local custom and go ahead and eat chal? We don't eat chal here. Amalei chutz l'tchum achaltinu. The halacha is that if you don't come into the tchum of that second city, that destination city, and you're outside the tchum, you're allowed to continue your kula because you still are considered makom sheyatza misham. You're not in makom shehalach l'sham. Halach l'sham means you went through the tchum and you entered into the city's boundaries. I ate this kal, says Rami Bar Tamri, outside the bounds of the city. So, for example, I don't know if you ever had an occasion where you traveled on Yontif Sheni Shel Golis from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. And it's a big shiloh whether you're allowed to do that because you're going to land on Yontif in Chutz La'aretz. So some poskim say that the airport is considered like Chutz L'Tchum, so that if you remain in the airport until nightfall, then you could take a taxi into town because you don't have to observe the minig HaMokom of Yontif, the Chumrah of Yontif Sheni, because your minig is Eretz Yisrael and they don't have Yontif Sheni, as long as you're not within the Tchum. So this is a big issue in modern poskim about whether or not the airport is considered part of the yishuv or not part of the yishuv. I once flew to Marseille in France. I think I told you this story. Maybe I should... Amaleh. So now Rabbi Bar Chama justifies the fact that he's eating chal in Surah by the fact that he's not eating it within the bounds of Surah, but rather outside of the bounds, chutz l'tchum, I ate it. Now Rav Chisda is still not happy. Why? Bameh tvisinu. How did you roast the udders? What did you have? Like a campfire outside of the tchum, out there in the wild, in the forests outside of Surah? Amalei. So Rabbi responds, bipurtzane. Now, what happens is when they press the wine, the grapes, there's what's called pits, right? The grape pits. And if you dry the grape pits, apparently you could use it as a kind of a fuel. So he asks him, Rav Chisda, Vidilma miyayin nesechavi. Maybe these were grapes of non-Jews, and the grapes of non-Jews have a status of yayin nesech. I can tell by these... I know that the pits are more than 12 months old. Now, for that, we'd have to learn a brisa on Daf Lamed Daled that the pits of grapes after 12 months are considered totally dried out, and it's batel. It's no longer yayin nesech. So he asks him, and he presses him, "Viduma gezel hava." What did you do? You found, you collected grapes, grape pits, that were laying on the ground there. Maybe they belonged to somebody. I could tell that nobody would want to pick up these grape seeds. They were misyayish from it because there were growths on them. things were sprouting. He says the fact that the owner would allow these pits to rot to the point that they had turned into like a dust-like substance, that they were sprouting vegetation, certainly the owner would have abandoned them. I guess in those days they wore tefillin the whole day. Why aren't you wearing tefillin? Asks Rav Chizda to Rami Bar Tamr. Amalei, my time alomasa. Amalei, choli me'ayin. He, referring to himself in third person, is has an ailment in his stomach, which means he cannot control his body, nebuch, and therefore he can't wear tefillin. Omar Rabbi Yehuda, and again he quotes his Rabbi Yehuda from Pumpadisa, choli me'ayin patur minat tefillin. Chazi de loavi ka rami chute, he wasn't wearing tzitzis. Even a choli me'ayin has to wear tzitzis. Amalei, my timer less like chutu, aren't you wearing tal she'uli? The Omer Rabbi Yehuda again, he quotes his Rabbi Yehuda that tal she'ula kol shloshim yom p'tura minat tzitzis. Now let's just take a minute just to imagine the situation of this Rami Bar Tamri. The man enters in to Surah on Erev Yom Kippurim. He doesn't have anything. He doesn't have food to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. He's got to collect the chal that they throw out. He doesn't have the ability to wear tefillin. He's just, physically broken. His stomach doesn't allow him to wear tefillin. The only way he could roast these grape seeds is because they're so old and disintegrated that the bailam are misyayish, and now they're so dried out that he could use that to light a little bit of a fire and heat up the kcha, roast his kcha that he picked up from Hefker. So the famous Rosh Hashiva, the Mir, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, I've quoted him more than once. He asked the question, why didn't he knock on somebody's door? Anybody would have invited this scholar on Erev Yom Kippurim for a good meal. And Reb Chaim builds a whole shita that a person doesn't want to be dependent on others. He doesn't want to ask for handouts, for gifts. Like here in Harnof, right? I'm being a little facetious, but you could probably go to any single minyan and be approached by an average of 5 people. It's one of the nice things about Ramat Beit Shem. Anyway, so what happens here is at a hachi. In the meantime, let me just set this up.